Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of Rhetoric with Shakia. I'm Shakia, and in this episode, we're going to talk about Suddenly Amish on TLC, Season 1, Episode 5. Now, I did mention this show before in another one of my videos, and I gave a brief overall recap about Suddenly Amish. Since then, I've watched, okay? I've watched. So here we are. We're talking about it. So Season 1, Episode 5, titled The Evil One. And I think that was inspired by how James feels, how he feels about Matt. Matt is back, and Kendra, she was literally falling for him. Nope. What's the joke sound? Okay. She was running over to him. She fell. I think that was the end of episode 4. She fell, and now, poor thing, she has her arm is in a sling. I think it's because of that fall. Matt is back. Kendra is super excited about it. James is not. So you know that there's some speculation that James might be interested in Kendra. And I think some of us may have speculated or suspected as such during one of the other episodes, one of the earlier episodes, where she was like, I need a phone. And he's like, I can't give you a phone. But then we see homeboy, he found a phone for her, right? And they went off and he let her make a call. So Alan and his wife, think of them as, if you're not familiar with the show, think of them as the house parents. And they are watching and monitoring these English folk that's coming up into their community. So Alan says that he thinks James might be interested in Kendra, because he is. But we're gonna talk about James some more in a minute. Emma, that's James's cousin. I'm emphasizing this because we're gonna talk about James and Emma in a minute. Emma says that they wouldn't make a good match, they being James and Kendra. Emma is like, no. They wouldn't be a good match. James says Matt's intentions for coming back is unknown. And because of that, he's not really trusting Matt. He's checking him out. He's like, yo, what do you want? What are you doing here? I already ran you off my property with an axe, okay? Why are you back? Was that not enough? What's going on up in here that you would come back after I chased you away with this axe? Now, he didn't say all that. I'm just adding that part in. They ultimately decide that Matt can stay. James is not happy about that. He decides, when it came down to the vote, he wasn't for it. He voted against it. But I guess in this case, majority rules, and so Matt was allowed to stay. You know who wasn't thrilled to have Matt back, which I was surprised about? Esmeralda. She said, look, no tea, no shade to Matt, but we've all been working. We have put in the work. And we've gotten to a place, and she doesn't want anybody or anything to interfere with that. And something else she mentioned in this episode is that she is starting to feel more confident, even without her lashes and her makeup. And I think that is awesome. This is one of the reasons why I like shows where it is some sort of experience in this way, because 9 times out of 10, if you allow it to happen, you will learn something about yourself and you will evolve. And that is what is happening, or so it seems, at least right now. But I think it's great because if you've watched earlier episodes, you know that she definitely struggled with removing her lashes, removing her makeup, and she talked about some of those insecurities. So I'm super excited for her that she recognizes she can be confident regardless of what she adorns herself with. Shout out to you, Esmeralda, go girl. Aaron also is not so excited to have Matt back. Aaron is like, he wants to make sure that Matt is committed. Because Matt, if you're not committed, you could go back to where you came from before James rushes you off his island, off his land again with an axe. I can't get over that, because who does that? And if somebody chased me away with an axe, I'm not coming back. So perhaps Matt is committed. Well, we're going to talk about that, because as the episode progressed, I don't know, but hold on, I'm jumping ahead. Now we're going to cut to the bishop, Vernon. The bishop is the head person in charge. He is running things within the church. He's a leader within the community, all of that. And now they're going to allow the English folk to go to the Amish church, which this is a huge, huge deal because usually outsiders are not invited. And when the service was going on, cameras were not allowed. So Vernon says, in the Amish world, church is everything. It's not just about faith. It's not just about your faith. It's also about community. And then it cuts to him in his rocking chair, reading his Bible. It looks very peaceful, okay? He looked very, very peaceful. And he wants the English folk to understand the church experience and says it's about doing life with others. Then he talks about the breakdown of church and how church service goes. He said you fellowship, and then for 3 to 3.5 hours, you have service. And then that is followed by a fellowship meal. He said it's a whole day. Now, as I was listening to Vernon, I'm like, oh, that sounds like the Pentecostal church. When I used to go to church, we were in there all freaking day. And then sometimes you'd have first service, then second service, then we gonna break, we gonna congregate, and then we going back again. Oh my God. I got another friend. I won't say the denomination that she's a part of, but when she's like, oh, I gotta go, I'm going to church, and I'm always laughing because these services are so short. It's a short little service, and I'm just like, I'm like, y'all could fit all of that in this little time frame? It's like an hour. How you have church in an hour? So anyway, I say all that to say, Vernon, I get it. All day service, I get it. James did say that the Amish were informed that the English would be joining service. The English people, they roll up. They didn't roll up, but they arrive. And of course they get some looks because people are like, look at these newcomers. What are these people about? Now, I'm just making assumptions. I don't really know what they said. And the English made a bit of a mistake as they were doing their initial fellowshipping. The men and women actually had to be separated. They weren't allowed to mix with each other at that time. So that was also something that was, I guess, that stood out to the English people. And moving forward, they go to service, and then after service, well, actually, we see a few of them, they duck out a little early. Once they started talking about service after the fact, Emma was upset. She was disappointed because she's like, they are not taking it seriously. When she found out that some of them had left early, and then she was like, they're moving around and they're restless, and she's saying, listen, this is such a huge part, I'm paraphrasing, this is such a huge part of our community that you have to take this seriously. Also, Judah, and I believe it was his confessional, he said, I felt like a pepper in a salt bucket. And I'm like, Judah, my guy, what did you expect? I'm not saying there are no brown folk or black, I say brown, but I'm not saying that there are none in the Amish community. But when we think of the Amish, we don't quite think of black and brown folk. Okay, we don't think of folk with melanin. So Judah, of course you're gonna stand up. Now there might be some other folk, but yes, you are absolutely gonna stick out. Yes, Judah, come on now. Aaron actually said that the church service was transcendent, and he was trying to get the most out of it. And so he said, even though he was having trouble, hearing, especially after the service, and when they were fellowshipping, he had some trouble, some difficulty with being a part of the conversation because of his hearing impairment. But nonetheless, he appeared to view the service and the whole experience very positively. So as they're sitting around, they're talking about church and service and all of that, they hear some music. And James is like, oh, That's that Rumspringa music, okay? And so Rumspringa is the time where the Amish youth will decide whether or not they will stay Amish or they'll go out and join the English world. He said during this time, they might drive cars, they might wear English clothes, they might dance some, and drink a little alcohol. And drink a little alcohol is what James did. He said he is from a very conservative church and he didn't have Rumspringa. He said if he did, maybe he would still be with the church. Because I think the only reason why he is participating in this experience with the English is because he is trying to get in with the church again. He's trying to, and he says that, I believe, at the end of the episode. So anyway, he said if he would have been allowed to have Rumspringa, then he could have pursued certain curiosities, as he put it. We see him dance. We see him partake in the alcohol. Mind you, he's the one who's enforcing all these rules. He's the one that chased Matt off his property with an axe because Matt is divorced. But James is he's rumspringing. Kendra and Matt, they all booed up with each other. Kendra is twerking, looking at Matt. James is looking at Kendra twerk, and Emma is looking at James as he is looking at Kendra as she is looking at Matt. They just having a rumspringa of a time. James said he's human too, and he likes to have a little fun. So in the name of rumspringa, rumspring it. Now, Kendra and Matt, again, they're booed up. I don't think James liked that I don't think he liked that. James was being a party animal. I think he needed to release some things. During this Rumspringa party, Emma and James were a little flirty with each other, wrestling each other and whatnot. And that would be cute if they weren't cousins. So then it just felt weird because why y'all playing like that with each other? I don't know. I don't like it. So now we're going to fast forward into the episode. So then at some point, Alan, he gathers the menfolk. He sits them around the table and they have a conversation. Alan said, I got to talk to these people about the birds and the bees. And I'm like, hold on, Alan. These folk are grown. I think they know about the birds and the bees. What you mean you got to? But they don't know about the birds and the bees the Amish way. So he gathers them up. He said, look, here we practice a hands-off approach when it comes to dating. There is no touching of the leg or the knee. There is no holding hands. None of that. Hands off. He said we respect women. We see them as helpmates and not just as some sex figure. Aaron asked the question. He said, well, what happens if premarital sex occurs and that results in an unplanned pregnancy? Will they be shunned? Alan like, hell yeah, they don't know. Alan said, yes, there will be consequences. There will be consequences. So then, so he says there'll be consequences, and Alan said it is your responsibility as the adult to teach kids, right? To teach kids the right way to be and to live and all of that. So now Judah, because remember, Judah has this secret that he has not shared with the Amish folk just yet. So Judah said, maybe this is my time to ask what I need to ask so I can get all the information about whether or not this whole Amish thing is really for me. So Judah said, well, he essentially asked about same-sex relationships. And Alan was like, I don't understand why he asked that. Why would you ask that? And so he said, no, that would not be accepted. I'm like, Judah, you know that. You know it wouldn't be accepted. So Judah says, well, this is unfortunate. He says this in his confessional. This is unfortunate because he still does not feel like he can tell the Amish, because if he told the Amish that he is in fact bisexual, he'll be shunned if he joined the church. He said, but he could fall in love with an Amish woman. But at the end of the day, you're still not being 100% about who you are. And so do we really want to join a church or organization or a community where we can't be who we are? You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, I don't know if this is for you, Judah. I don't know if this is for you. So Judah said he's going to leave it up to God. This actually brings me to another part of the episode where the bishop calls the English people into the barn back into this barn one by one, because he wants to hear from them how the experience is going so far. And Judah, when he's talking with Judah said, this kind of feels like a cult. And I was like, okay, go ahead, Judah, for being honest, because listen, here's what I'm going to say, because people could get real interesting when it comes to certain things. When you read the definition of a cult and you read the definition of certain organized organizations, there is a lot of overlap there. But that's for another video. The bishop, though, I appreciated his response. He didn't become defensive. He had a solid conversation with Judah. Now, what he said about Judah, if Judah were to join the Amish church, I found really interesting. Because remember, Judah said, hey, this kind of feels like a cult. Here's what the bishop said about Judah. He said, if he were to join the Amish church, that Judah would have to overcome his individuality. He said the Amish would see that as a detriment, because you can't go against the grain when you're in certain types of religion, certain types of organizations. And Judah is very much an individual. Judah, he marches to the beat of his own drum. And so I'll go through what he said about some of the other people. DJ says she was struggling with the heat. So Judah is struggling with individuality and being upfront and honest about his sexuality, and BJ is struggling with the heat, the fact that there is no AC. But anyway, the bishop does say for outsiders coming in to lay down their own agendas and focus on becoming one with everybody else. If you come in another way, that's a recipe for disaster. Now remember, Judah said, this feels like a cult. I'm just going to leave it at that. Matt said so the bishop asked, of course he asked Matt, well, why you come back? Matt said he came back because there's some unfinished business. Unfinished business with what or who, Matt? Unfinished business with James because he ran you up off his land, or unfinished business with Miss Kendra. So the bishop did have some final thoughts after meeting with the English people and what his thoughts were about them joining the church. He said that Kendra now has an understanding, or Kendra understands how important modesty is to the Amish culture. Because remember, on day one, Miss Kendra showed up in her little dress, showing all her skin and all the things to Amish country, to the Amish, okay? That was a no-no. He pulled her into that barn and he had a conversation with her, and that really hurt Kendra's feelings. But now he says, look, she got it. Judah, we already talked about the fact that the bishop said he would have to overcome his individuality. He said regarding Aaron that Aaron would have to know that using these different hearing aids is not a punishment. It's actually freeing him up from the technology that he's clinging to. Regarding Billy Joe, he said, look, BJ would be welcome to join the Amish. As for Esmeralda and Matt, he says they are the outliers and that it would take discipleship to integrate them to their lifestyle. So according to the bishop, they got some work to do. The bishop also asked James and Emma, remember, James and Emma, the cousins, okay, to one another. How were things going? I don't even really know what conversation they had about that, because Emma starts talking about James's eyes, his eye color. And the bishop initially, he says, y'all are cousins, right? And Emma says, do we look alike? And then she starts talking about his eye color. And even the bishop is sitting over there looking at them. Even, he's like, wait a second. So he's just watching. He's watching. He like, wait a minute. In her confessional, later on, Emma says that they've been very close, she and James, that they've been very close over the years, and that he's helped her a lot and he's been impactful in her life, and that they're best friends. Then, because now they're in a confessional together, she asked him, would he date her? And he says, I don't know. She says, I don't see how we could be bad for each other. And James said, well, we do enjoy each other's company. Then, if that wasn't one thing, here's another. Then Emma says, he kind of taught me a lot of what I know. What did you teach her, James? What did you teach Emma? And so then they both look at each other and start laughing. And then in the confessional where James is by himself, he says, no, we never hooked up. James, as my grandmother would say, tell the truth, shame the devil, because I don't know. I can't, I don't believe it. And here's why. Because as the episode continues, you know what we see? We see that nighttime vision. We see Emma and James coming out of the same room, one after the other. I guess they're going into the bathroom. And when James comes out of the room, he doesn't have a shirt on. And he has something wrapped around his waist. What are you doing in the middle of the night with your cousin behind closed doors, making a noise in the bathroom? What you doing? James and Emma? What's going on? Then it's the next day, or at some point it's days after, but now we cut to another scene in the episode. So Matt, he's out there, he's working hard. James is smirking because he said some people gotta work extra hard. So he gives Matt this job. I don't know what the hell they doing on the land, but he gives him something to do. I don't remember. Kendra walks up. Kendra like, what you doing? He's like, oh, I'm trying to do this thing, but it's really hard. Kendra said, well, if anybody asks, say that it's broken. Let's go to the creek. Okay, now they dip off. They go and they're sitting in the grass. And then Matt tells Kendra that Alan had a talk with him. And he said, Alan saw my hand on your knee or something like that, and said it's a handoff approach. We can't touch each other. Matt says this thing with Kendra is exciting, even more exciting because it almost feels forbidden. And he said, if we were out in the English world, I would have already kissed her by now. Now, here's the thing. I do think there is something to not being super physical initially when you first meet somebody. I can understand the benefit, and I can see how also it might add to that excitement that Matt was talking about. But I also can recognize the benefit to allowing yourself to see how well you connect with that person when it comes to physical closeness. And it doesn't just mean adult activity, but just literally physical closeness. And that's something that I believe Kendra said. She was like, look, it's really important to know if you have that type of chemistry with somebody. And it's true. But there is something to taking your time. And I think that's how we find that middle path, right? That's how we find that middle ground. You don't need to jump into anything too physical too soon, because it can take away from actually getting to know the other person. So there's something to that, but we gotta find a middle path here, because then guess who just appeared out of nowhere, coming out of these trees? Emma. And Emma got a stick in her hand. Now, mind you, this man, Matt, he already been run off the land with a freaking ex. And now Emma got a stick and she's like, arm's length, too close. She sounds like a warden. So they're looking at her. Kendra's like, what the F? And Kendra's like, I'm pissed right now. I bet you were, Kendra, because you thought y'all was going to get a little close, regardless of what Alan said. But now here go Emma. Emma said, look, if I got to sneak around because I'm not even supposed to be doing that with my cousin, allegedly, y'all ain't doing nothing. Emma makes them a stick, literally, to keep in between them so that they can be arm's length from one another. So now Kendra's like, well, we don't mess with her. So then Kendra and Matt, they get up and they head toward the water. That's where Emma is at this point. And Matt is holding Kendra's hand as they are getting in the water, which makes sense. It was a lot of rocks and things. So it wasn't very balanced. And so Kendra, now she's taunting Emma though. She's like, oh, would this be acceptable? Is this okay? Look, Emma is pissed. She's in her mind, she's like, they're being disrespectful. You're not supposed to be that close. You're not supposed to be touching each other. And look at what they're doing. And I'm like, now Emma, girl, I get no sloppy PDA. I understand that, but holding hands, a little peck here and there, what is wrong with that? Outside of being pissed though, and some of those shots, I think Emma looked a little sad. And I think it has to do with being so restricted. You know, you're not allowed to do anything. You're not allowed to do anything, especially when it comes to self-expression or exploration. And we see how that worked out for James. No. Cut to, they get back to the house. Of course, who's there out on the porch? James. And he's like, oh, what y'all were doing? Kendra and Matt are like, we were hanging out by the creek. So he asked Emma, what did they actually do? And then he pulls Matt aside and he says, I have a problem with you. You're an English guy trying to drag off our Amish ladies. We can't have that. And he says, in his confessional, Matt is leading Kendra astray and Kendra struggles with temptation. And he says he has to put a stop to it. James, you have to, first of all, why you? Mind your business, but you have to put a stop to it? Somebody should put a stop to what you may have been doing or not doing with your cousin late at night. You were alone with a woman. What were y'all doing? But anyway, because see, this is what happened when things are so restricted. Now he's in everybody else's business. He's tightly wound because he can't freely behave the way he'd like to. And I'm not saying you got to go out here and be a deviant. I'm not saying that, but we get to allow physical contact. We get to have physical contact, not even just physical contact. You know what? I digress. That's a whole nother video. Anyway, so then James says to Matt, you can't think about dating an Amish lady in the Amish church if you were formally married. And Matt is like, is she formally in the Amish church? And I was like, oh snap. Okay. Because James, mind your business. It's just too much. But also, James, he probably likes Kendra. He's torn because James wants his Kendra and Emma too. Get it? Okay. Anyway, so then we're going to fast forward because at this point, Matt is annoyed. And he's like, look, these people, because I think in one of the other scenes when Emma was saying that Kendra and Matt had to be arm's length, separate themselves, give themselves some space. And he's like, it's one thing they're telling us what to do, but this girl in her 20s is telling us what to do. We're in our 30s already. Mind you, Matt was already married. So it's so interesting to now be in a situation where you were told literally how to live, but to each their own. So then James, he gets into it with Matt. And because he and James had that little spat, Matt is like, I'm not staying here tonight. I'm going to a motel. You guess who's going with him? Kendra. So BJ sees Kendra and she says, what are you doing? Why do you have on English clothes? What's happening? Kendra says, well, Matt and James got into it. Matt is going to a hotel. I'm going to go with him. BJ is livid. She's like, why would you do that? Like, you can't say you want to be part of this community and then you're going to run off with him to a motel? So now James gets wind of this, of course. So he gets dressed and he said, there's only one motel that's near here. I know where they are. I'm going to go find them. And I got to go. I'm paraphrasing here. I got to go save Kendra from this evil man. I can't have that. I can't have him tainting her. So he's off to go and find her. Of course, that's where the episode stopped. We see a preview for the upcoming episode. Oof. And it looks like some things might happen that upsets Emma a bit more. So we'll see what took place with Kendra and Matt, and what took place with James and Matt, and what took place with Emma and James. We gonna see, because apparently ish is going down, okay? Ish is going down up in the Amish world. But anyway, that's all I got. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you come back for the next one. But until then, bye for now.